Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel. My name is Colleen Carroll, and I serve as the NXUnite lead here at Nexus Marketing and will be your moderator for today's session. We have a very pertinent topic today. If you are celebrating Valentine's Day, our topic is showing the love, donor recognition, and appreciation. And I'm really looking forward to learning from this group of panelists. But as usual, before we jump in and get started, I do have my few quick logistics to cover. NXUnite by Nexus Marketing serves as a powerful community resource designed to foster connections and facilitate lasting relationships within the mission-driven sector. On NXUnite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, and cause-driven podcasts. NXUnite also hosts webinars, demos, and of course, panels with experts such as the lovely folks here with me today. Today's hour-long panel will include time both for questions curated by my team and questions from you all, our fantastic audience. We have some questions for registration, but I will give priority to those of you who are joining us live. So if you have any topics that you would like our panelists to cover, please let us know either in the chat function or in the questions tab. And I will note that the earlier you get those questions in, the more likely we'll be able to address your question, and the more likely we'll be able to get through a larger number of questions in our second portion of the panel. So if you have a topic that you've come into today's session really hoping we're going to discuss, it is totally appropriate to submit that question right now. All right, if at any point you are having any technical difficulties or have any logistics questions, please reach out in the chat. My colleague Malou is here under the Team NXUnite username and will do her best to assist. So let us know what's happening and we'll figure out how to get you back on and enjoying the session as quickly as possible. I did also want to mention that this panel session is being recorded. So if you get to the end and the insight you heard is just so fantastic, you need to hear it a second time right away. That is wonderful news. It's going to automatically be in your email inbox at the end of the session. Give it a few minutes after we wrap up and you'll have access to that recording. It will also continue to live on the NXUnite website. So if you have any friends in the industry who you're like, can't believe they missed it, they needed to be there, that answered every question they've ever had, feel free to share that same landing page that you used to register and they'll be able to access the recording. All right, finally, before I introduce today's panelists, I want to give a big thank you to our audience. Whether you are joining us live or you're watching the recording, thanks for being part of our NXUnite community and learning with us. If you are joining live, I do hope you'll submit those questions so we can address the topics most relevant to you and your team. All right, to begin with our introductions, I'd first like to introduce Barbara Schulman, who serves as the Vice President at Faircom New York. She's a marketing professional with over 20 years of experience in multi-channel campaign strategy and management. She has a successful track record of increasing revenue through the introduction of new program opportunities and improved data interpretation. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and chat with everybody. Maybe I'll learn some new things too.
Wonderful. Also here with us is Carly Euler, who serves as the marketing manager at Memory Fox, where she values the opportunity to elevate hundreds of nonprofits' missions. She has held positions at the Wiley Network, Breast Cancer Coalition, Code of Support Foundation, Kenya Lacrosse Association, and BOMA Project, where she has specialized in marketing, special events, communications, and fundraising. Carly, great to have you on another panel.
Hello, thanks for having me. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. Sarah Lang is the principal and founder at Sarah B. Lang LLC. She is one of the nonprofit sector's top revenue generators, having raised over $100 million. She's worked with over 200 nonprofits to raise more money, build stronger boards, chart a roadmap for the future, and brag about the good work they're doing. Sarah, great to have you on this panel.
Thank you for having me. And I'm so excited that we have so many people with us today.
Wonderful. Finally, here with us today is Robert Selman, who is the SVP of Growth and Partnerships at OmniAlly, the leading digital donor walls solution provider. He specializes in unionizing client organizations' development strategy to digital donor walls in ways that engage supporters. Crafted correctly, a digital donor wall does more than celebrate donors, it accentuates a culture of philanthropy. Robert's vision is to lower the barrier to entry for meaningful donor engagement systems so that there's an accessible option for an everyday nonprofit. Robert, glad to have you on the panel.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right, it is time for us to jump in and get started. And Carly, I'm going to have you start us off with our first question. How can nonprofits innovate their donor recognition strategies beyond the traditional thank you letter?
Well, great. I'm so excited that you decided to start with me because I have three really big things that I've been just dying to tell everybody since I saw this question. So first, in terms of donor recognition strategies that are beyond the traditional thank you letter, I first just want to say, let's stop sending thank you letters that look like bills because those are going to scare me. I don't really want to open them, even if it's the nicest letter. So instead, maybe consider sending a postcard, send an actual handwritten card, something that's going to be a different shape, maybe a little more fun, a fun color envelope, something that's going to make it so I'm not a little bit worried about opening it. So that would be my first just tip right off the top. Second, I think I would definitely recommend multimedia strategies. So, this is obviously, I work at Memory Fox. We're all about video content. And I think, at this point, every single social media platform, maybe with the exception of LinkedIn, is prioritizing video. And you might be wondering, well, why do people do that? Or why are they doing that? But I mean, that's what people want to consume. So I really just feel like video is the number one way that you can connect with people, especially when you're trying to tell them about your mission or about the impact that their donation has had. And that could be just a selfie style thank you video. It could be a composite video of a bunch of clips that have to do with your mission, maybe with a voiceover. But if you want to integrate that with a traditional thank you letter, it's really not that hard to do. You just have to make sure that you prioritize putting a QR code that will take the person to the video. So after they read your nice handwritten letter, they can go ahead and hear from you in another way. And when you are adopting a multimedia strategy like this, it's really what you're telling your donors is that you care about the way they want to hear from you, instead of telling them how you are going to talk to them. So you're giving them two different ways to get the same message across. They can go ahead and engage with it either way. And then finally, I would say that taking it one step beyond a traditional thank you letter is really making it a two-way conversation. So you're seeing this more and more where people are ending their emails by saying, hey, let me know, reply to this email with something fun you did this weekend, or reply to this email, with, anything, lots of things that people can reply with. But you can actually do this with a thank you letter as well. You could put in a link for a Memory Fox campaign, or you could do a Google survey. There's plenty of free options that you could use, of course. And you might just want to ask people, why did you choose to support us today? Or what do you find most inspiring about my mission? And the thing is, most people will not respond. That's totally fine, because the people who do take the time to respond, who do really want to make a two-way conversation with you, those are going to be the people who will ultimately become your biggest champions. And they're really just proving that you're going to find new ways that they are going to find value in your mission as well.
Carly, thank you so much for starting us off there. Sarah, I'm going to bring this same question over to you. If we're looking beyond the traditional thank you letter, what do you recommend?
Yeah, so I'm really focused on donor retention with my clients right now in this economic uncertainty zone we seem to be rolling through every, few months. We don't know whether we're going up or down. It's a little bit of a roller coaster. So I'm really focusing on retention. And the thing is that, it's all about the relationship. And so you can lose 50% of your donors between donation 1 and donation 2. So 50% of people are going to walk away, and we can't afford that. So I set up what I call a welcome packet with each client, and it's usually comprised of a drip campaign where there's 6 emails over 6 weeks. And the content could be anything. It could be a link to your annual report. It could be a thank you video from your board chair. It could be a testimonial from a client. So we just decide what is easy content to produce. Again, we focus on video. So thanks for showcasing that, Carly. But we really want to know people, like, you matter, your gift matters, and we want to immediately engage them rather than just waiting until the next time we need money and we show up at their doorstep saying, hey, we're back. And what we're finding is the retention rates go through the roof after the welcome packet. So before we started sending it out, retention rate is X, Y, or Z. And then afterwards, the retention rates are really high. So it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's just a series of 6 emails sent over 6 weeks to more deeply engage. And one of the things we often send out is a donor survey to find out what is really resonating with the hearts of our donors. So that's my recommendation, is don't just send a thank you, but like make them really part of your community.
Thank you, Sarah. Before we hear from our other 2 panelists, I want to let our audience know that we have had a poll go live where we've asked you all, outside of a thank you letter, what is your favorite form of donor recognition? So if you want to contribute to the conversation a little bit, go fill out that poll now. All right, Robert, over to you. How can nonprofits innovate their donor recognition strategies beyond a traditional donor wall?
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question, and it's it really drives the core concept behind digital donor walls. So not only are they much faster and painless to update, you can also add storytelling components on a whim, or interactive features to engage viewers. You could even have a tap to donate system built into the donor wall that instantly thanks the donor. And there's just so much more that you can really do with it. So I guess that's to say digital donor walls have really had leaps and bounds over the last few years, becoming quite a bit more affordable at the entry level, while also having significantly more unique and strategic features at the mid and the high level. So basically, if you're looking for your donor wall to be more of a tool than like a boring list of names on plaques, then the natural evolution is to go digital.
Thank you, Robert. All right, Barbara, same question over to you. How can our nonprofits innovate their donor recognition strategies beyond the traditional thank you letter?
Well, we do recommend a lot of the things we've already heard about. And one of the things I always like to start with is we do like to plan out a donor journey for all our donors. So it's about sort of the communication from when they first come on throughout their interactions with you. And part of that is knowing your audience. You might have different donor journeys for different groups. We still are a believer in the traditional thank you. We love to do both online and offline because to Carly's point earlier, we like to reach out from an omni-channel point of view, and then donors can decide how they want to interact back with you. As well as the welcome packages that Sarah mentioned. I had those on my list as well. Those are extremely important. And we find that, again, we do that as an omni-channel type of approach where we'll have something printed. As even for online donors, sometimes they like to have a physical piece that they get. Usually that's one step in the mail, but can be multi-steps in the email. We do like to take beyond, though, that thank you and develop the recognition throughout the year. And some of the other things we recommend are if you do a month append for birthdays, sending out a birthday card. You can do these monthly, quarterly, kind of look at your budget, you print for the year. We have organizations of all different sizes that we work with, and we always work with them to find cost-effective ways to do this. I think one of the things that a lot of groups, the hole they fall into is it's not making money tomorrow, but it might make money down the line. And to Sarah's point about the retention rate going up, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later about looking at those long-term things, but we really like to make sure that the donor is getting the appreciation and thank you throughout the year. We like to give giving anniversary cards. Again, the surveys we find incredibly helpful. And if you do have a database that's sophisticated enough to take the data back in so that you can act on the survey, that is really recognizing your donors' wants and needs, and it's extremely important to do that. So we love doing all of that. We look to fit where a budget is, but really having those multiple touch points, whether it's an impact or a thank you postcard that comes out during the year. If you're a smaller group and you're sending thank yous out from your office, to Carly's great point about not making it look like a bill, you can easily buy a stamp at Amazon that says welcome or thank you. It doesn't cost a lot, and it just personalizes that first interaction or the ongoing interaction. So we have sort of, how do we say thank you when we've never heard from you before? And then how do we say thank you when you're already part of the family to get even more engaged?
Thank you, Barbara. All right, checking in on that poll. Again, we asked our audience, outside of the thank you letter, what is your favorite form of donor recognition? 59% of you said handwritten notes from beneficiaries. 14% said personalized video messages expressing gratitude. 14% said invitations to exclusive donor appreciation events. And 14% said public recognition through social media or newsletters. Obviously, there's a ton of other ways to recognize our donors. So if we did not include your absolute favorite one, please feel free to let us know in the chat. We'd love to see that. All right, Robert, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. What role does personalization play in effective donor appreciation, and how can technology assist in achieving this at scale?
Yeah, so personalized thank you experience are pretty crucial to stewardship and retention. Which is why organizations are really kind of migrating from a traditional style donor wall into more of a digital solution. So at scale, there are solutions like RFID donor cards to commemorate the donor that you can give to them. And then whenever they're on site, they can actually use that to scan at the donor wall. And then the donor wall comes up with a personalized thank you message right there on the spot. It's very intimate, something that you can do at scale. But then on the other side of the spectrum, we also open up a whole world of, like gathering why I give stories, for instance, which can and really should be done strategically. So, yes, get stories from your best donors, right? But also use the why I give stories as an opportunity to reach out to potentially lapsing donors at the major and even mid-sized gift levels. I mean, if you do even just 3 every quarter, you'd have 12 major mid-sized donors retained, at the end of the year, which, bridges the ROI for a digital donor wall pretty directly. It only takes retaining one major donor to really make or break a year, right?
Thank you, Robert. All right, Barbara, over to you. What do you see as the role of personalization in donor appreciation, and how can our technology support this?
Well, obviously, it's super important, and we always like to kind of work with the groups to see what level of how good their data is. So the better your data is, the more personalization that you can put in is always good. If you don't have great data, at least using first name, and some of the recognition that you do, usually you have that right. But if you're not sure, we also just recommend doing things like voice broadcast, lo-fi emails that look like they're coming from someone. So there's ways to connect, even if you don't think your data is great, and still making it feel very personal. We love the real pen. If you have, if you can't afford real pen, we've had some groups that have volunteers and they come in once a month and actually hand address. So we kind of balance the tech with the non-tech. But we really think that having that balance between the two and then adding in as much data as you can about the donor. So that really is what makes the difference, I think. I love some of the donor wall stuff, so I'm going to be taking some notes on that for myself. And it's really, it's about having that contact, I think. So using your technology to the best of what you have and making sure, to Robert's point, of doing it on a regular basis. So making sure you're reaching out quarterly, whether that's through new recognition online or offline, just taking advantage of all those opportunities to really reach out and touch your donors.
Thank you, Barbara. All right, our second poll has dropped where we've asked you all, do you feel that your donor strategies are effectively personalized? So if you'd like to share a little bit about your experience and where you're coming to this conversation from, go fill out that poll now. Carly, over to you. Thoughts on the role of personalization and how we can use tech to support?
Sure. So, as Barbara and Robert both mentioned, personalization obviously is super important just to making people feel appreciated and like you actually know them, because in a lot of ways you do know them because they give to something just like that you believe in. You guys, you have a kindred spirit in some way. I will just say that, Barbara, you mentioned this during the first question, but yeah, I love the idea of like sending out an automated email for a birthday or a giving anniversary. And that's, you can do that automated if you have the data to back it up. So that's a great way that technology can assist you in doing that. I would even say if you do have a portion that you can set aside a little bit of time to make it even more personalized, that would be great. And I would recommend maybe you set up a report that you look at once a month, and maybe it's the upcoming birthdays and the upcoming giving anniversaries. Some names might stand out as people you want to give a phone call to. Some names might stand out as a letter that needs to come from your executive director specifically, or maybe from somebody, from a program participant like you guys indicated in the poll, right? That's something that people enjoy doing or enjoy reading. So that would be another way that technology could help. I also think in terms of personalization, also from the viewpoint of your brand, free tools like Canva, if you guys haven't started using Canva for nonprofits, you get all of these great features and it's completely free for you. You just have to fill out a little application. But it's really easy to insert your logo, insert your brand colors, insert pictures, videos, directly from your mission into great templates. So that is a great way that you can make something look really personalized and use technology to do so. And I finally will just say, sometimes I think we also forget that when it comes to personalization, when it comes to outreach, we actually also can do personalization in not outreaching to people. So for example, if you know that there is somebody in your community who has a big surgery coming up, or they have an illness that's impacted their day-to-day life, remove them from those automated emails. They don't need to be hearing from, they don't need the clutter. They might not need all the inbox stuff that you normally would send to them. And it really would be the extra mile if you go ahead and give them a phone call, maybe a week later, 2 weeks later, something that says, hey, I just want to check in on you. And then you put them back into your system of receiving correspondence. So my final thought on that is just that sometimes also not reaching out to people can be a really great way to show that you are appreciative of their time and what they're going through.
Great points. Thank you so much, Carly. All right, Sarah, I'm sure you know what questions coming your way. Thoughts on the role of personalization?
Well, everybody has just had such good ideas and thoughts and input. And so that doesn't leave me much to say. But what I do want to say is personalization is everything. Your donors are giving a gift from their heart. Philanthropy means love of mankind, right? So this is a relationship they're trying to have, not only with your organization, but with the people who are like on the other side of your organization. So the service recipients. And it is a gift that they could give to somebody else or not at all. And so we really, really need to appreciate them and show gratitude. And one of the ways we can do this is make sure that our data is good. So for example, one of the ongoing struggles I have is I'm a single parent. My son happens to have a different last name, and we have organizations. We're a very philanthropic family, and we have had organizations marry us in their database, which is creepy and gross. And like, it just makes me feel like you don't know who I am and you don't understand the relationship, that this is my son. He's not my husband or partner or something, So I just want to use that as an example of ways that we can enter data that is not donor friendly. I always politely let them know that the relationship is mother-son, not partner. And so I don't know whether it's the databases that don't allow for that, but just be really careful about when you put the data in your database that you're attributing the right relationship. So that's really, really important. The other thing is for those organizations that are very small and maybe using volunteers to enter data, you definitely want to set up data protocols. So there should be rules around how data gets entered. So sometimes you might have partners living in the same household with different last names. So how do you handle that? Right. So just make sure that the rules are being followed for data entry. So hopefully won't send something to Mr. Susan Smith. Right. So that's a donor turnoff. So it is really important because remember, This is them saying, my heart hurts because of this issue. Here's my gift. And then you're not paying attention to them, or we're not responding in the right way, or responding in an incorrect way. And the number one reason donors leave us is because they feel their gift doesn't matter. So everything we're talking about today is so important, even down to the tiniest details. So I think I would say data entry, data maintenance is all really important.
Thank you so much, Sarah. All right, we do have another poll results to go through. We asked you all, how do you feel your donor strategies are in terms of the effectiveness of the personalization? 67% of you said it's somewhat there, but there's room for improvement. 24% said no, our strategies are mostly one size fits all. 5% said yes, we tailor communications based on donor preferences, and 5% said not sure. So thank you all for filling that out. We are across the board, so everyone's in the right place, and can't wait to talk to you all further about this topic. All right, Barbara, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. How can nonprofits create an effectively timed and consistent donor appreciation experience across various channels, ranging from social media to direct mail?
Well, I think there's two sides to this, I will say. It goes back to sort of what I spoke about earlier, the donor journey, having an understanding of the different cohorts that you bring in and how you want to communicate to them throughout the year. And it might be different based on whether they're a monthly donor, they're a major donor, they're a first-year donor. So understanding that and building that out at the beginning of sort of your planning for the year can help you build out those schedules and those programs. And then on top of that, understanding how your channels are going to work together. Because while an organization might have their digital group, their communication group, I mean, I have someone who has development and marketing, and they both do fundraising. So there's a lot of different groups out there. So getting that coordination and agreement internally on what those touch points are going to be is extremely important. And sometimes actually having a third party, like we've come in as the third party expert to help our clients work with other groups just to kind of go over that importance. And again, data becomes king here, because we know some people have systems, they have one CRM that covers everything. Other people have a different CRM for each channel that they work in. So, ideally, if you have one system, you get your records tagged correctly, you know what's going out. If not, you do need to build those integrations, whether they're by hand or somehow automated, on what those touch points are going to be, and then plan out that communication. So, I'm going to send the birthday card, I'm going to send their anniversary giving. Maybe one of those will have a small mission-based token with some kind of thank you as part of it. What we also recommend for a lot of groups, because we know cost is a big factor, and it's very hard to convince senior management a lot of times of the investment in some of these things, is to make those plans for the year, pre-print for the year. So anything that's going out in the mail, print for your whole year. You can keep a lot of it digital, so you can still have a lot of personalization, a lot of updates, while maintaining kind of the big expense up front. And then working that into your digital calendar, which I know can sometimes be trickier than into your mail calendar. But again, getting that buy-in early is the most important thing, and understanding. So for this group, I'm going to send them a birthday card, an anniversary card. Maybe it's a mid-level group or sustainers. They get 4 quarterly personalized impact reports and 1 year-end impact report. But planning that for the year, we find, is really key to have that consistency in messaging. Because when it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do next month? It's much harder to put that in place, and it does end up costing more. So it's sort of a win on both sides.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Sarah, over to you. Thoughts on how we can effectively time and be consistent with our donor appreciation when we're talking various channels?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Barbara was saying. It's all about planning. So I usually at the beginning, it's right at the beginning of the year, because most people are crazy up until December 31st trying to get every single dollar in. So right after the new year, we usually revisit the communications calendar that we set up for the previous year and look at different touch points. I'm working with a new client on that right now. So in June, they have a big golf tournament. So we're, making sure that whole 6-week period is like really focused on that. And at the same time, we don't want their other donors to feel unloved. So we have other strategies. So for me, it's really all about sitting down, looking at the different touch points of the year. So, Barbara's talking about giving anniversaries, or there might be certain groups that you want to recognize differently. And so for me, it's all about the planning. And, Barbara mentioned that it's easier in terms of costs to do this ahead and get things printed ahead. The one thing I do want to say is baby boomers, are going to carry philanthropy through 2035, and boomers like paper. They might donate online, but they like paper. So I know we're all so programmed now to gear towards like digital everything, but if you really want to capture your boomers, you actually want to send them paper. So that's another differentiation that I would make, just to add on to what Barbara was saying earlier about the way that you plan, is that you want to think about how do you not just touch your boomers through digital means, but also through papers. Ditto with World War II. There's not a lot of World War II folks left, but they are some of the most diligent, loyal givers you will ever find. And so they too respond to paper. Some of them, I know my dad, who was 86 when he passed, was on the computer, but some days it just went from stupid to ugly, and he'd be calling me for tech support. Like, Dad, I can't see your computer. But anyway, so just keeping that in mind.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, Carly, final thoughts on how we can make sure we're handling our various channels.
Yeah, sure. I'll just keep it short. Barbara, you guys all have said really wonderful things about this question. So I don't have a ton to add, but I will just give one strategy, maybe in case you don't have that solid data to back up some of these strategies. One really cool way that you can just consistently show the love to your donors is to use national holidays as a way to actually strategize a good message for them. So instead of just putting out a generic post like you normally would, maybe today, Valentine's Day, take it one step further and really make your donors your Valentines. Maybe like really show a really cool way, a video from your CEO, maybe a video from the entire staff, something that really makes them feel special. And it doesn't have to stop with Valentine's Day. On St. Patrick's Day, you can say, here's why we're so lucky to know you. On Thanksgiving, obviously, that's about generosity. So there's a lot of easy ways to make that fit. But also, there are a lot of nonprofit specific holidays that sometimes I think we miss. We all know Giving Tuesday. Okay, so that's an easy one. But February 17th is coming right up. That's Random Acts of Kindness Day. On October 5th, we celebrate National Do Something Nice Day. Those are things that we all do every day when we work in the nonprofit sector. So maybe just use some of those as a way to have an excuse to reconnect with your donors and really make them feel extra special.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carly. All right. I want to remind our audience that now is the best time to submit your questions. I've seen some really fantastic ones come in that I'm very excited to pose to our panelists, but if there's something in the back of your mind that you're debating about asking, please send it in now. If I get it in the final few minutes of the session, I probably won't be able to pose it to our panelists. So the earlier you can get it to me, the better. All right, Sarah, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. What are some proven stewardship strategies that can help nonprofits deepen relationships with major donors and retain their support over time?
Yeah, so one of the things that is very, very important that most of us don't necessarily understand is donor identity, right? So this is why I have all my clients send out an annual donor survey to actually ask their donors, how would you describe yourself as a person? Like, what are the 5 words? And how would you describe yourself as a donor? And there's other questions we ask, like what prompts you to give? What's your favorite thing about our organization? But the thing is that you want them to feel as they are part of your mission, right? So goes back to donor engagement, and you want to deepen the relationship. So if somebody says, oh, I'm a generous person, you want to hold up the mirror and tell them, we know how generous you are. We appreciate how generous you are. So, back in the day when word clouds were really popular, this is the kind of thing you can use, though, to make sure that you're literally using your donors' words, because, we're inside the organization and we don't always see it from their perspective and their eyes. And so one of the things you can do is literally use their language. And so this is actually part of donor psychology and neurolinguistic programming. When you use their words back to them, it actually helps them resonate on the same level with you and feel that connection. So even though it's a subconscious thing, they are feeling a deeper connection with you when you use the words they use to describe themselves. And so that's one of the key things I would say is just remember that your donors have an identity, and you want to align that identity with your organization because you're deepening the connection. And as you deepen the connection, they become more involved, which I would assume means they're giving you more money or other treasures that they have. So that's the one thing I would say is pay attention to donor identity.
Thank you, Sarah. Robert, over to you. Thoughts on proven stewardship strategies that can help retain our major donors and support that relationship?
Yeah, I think, the broad answer is that the more your donors feel like they're a part of the journey, the more likely they are to continue being involved. Earlier, I touched on a couple of ways to use digital donor walls for stewardship, but I think the one that has the most obvious impact is leveraging the Why I Give stories to reach out to both major and mid-sized donors kind of more one-on-one, especially donors that are at risk of not giving again. The fact that you've reached out to these donors personally and are asking for a favor with no monetary consequence shows you as like authentically appreciating them. It's not just, oh, well, this person's calling again, they want money. You're establishing that authentic personal relationship. It really makes them feel like they're truly a part of the mission and that their previous gifts haven't gone unnoticed, just like Sarah was saying.
Thank you so much, Robert. Carly, over to you. Thoughts on those stewardship strategies that can help deepen the relationships with major donors?
Sure. So I'm really glad that Sarah and Robert both talked about storytelling because that was going to be the thing that I wanted to talk about. So I actually will go just a slightly different direction. And I'll say that one of the things that I believe, or that is going to be something that everyone's going to start talking about soon, hopefully, is that when you are telling stories, especially about your program beneficiaries, when you are doing that in an ethical way, as opposed to using traditional like poverty porn style stories or really exploitative stories, or deficit-based language as opposed to now switching to asset-based language. That's what's really going to keep people coming back and giving to your organization again and again. I say that because we have seen exploitative stories like this all the time, right? And yes, sometimes they do elicit people wanting to give, but studies show that people are giving because they kind of want it to just be out of their face. They don't want to see it anymore. It's like something they don't want to deal with, and let me just throw some money at it. But instead, when you start writing stories about your program beneficiaries in a more ethical, trauma-informed way, that's what's going to bring people, like Robert was saying, into your mission and really feel like they're part of the solution. They're going to help actually do this long-term thing that's going to make a huge difference. And I really think that's how you are going to get people that will keep coming back, because they're going to want to keep being part of those hopeful stories or part of those stories that are going to really relieve people and make them feel like they do have a much better future. And I just think that is really kind of the way that we're going to see storytelling going. And just because things used to be written a different way, we don't have to keep doing that. And actually here at Memory Fox, we did just put together an ethical storytelling report. And I will drop that in the chat too. I feel like I'm so lucky that I have links to drop right now. This is so fun. But I will drop that in the chat too. If anybody's interested in just learning some strategies on how to tell more stories in a more ethical way, that'll just be something I'd love to share.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carly. All right, Barbara, thoughts on those stewardship strategies for our major donors?
We've already talked about a lot of great things, and I have to say I agree with all of that. We've also moved to that kind of method of storytelling with a lot of our clients. So I'll just add some of the more technical pieces that we like to have, we like to offer as well. For that kind of deeper engagement for the major donors, we do, to Sarah's point, want to make sure that we have those surveys out there and that we're capturing and giving back what people have asked for. So we like to also find out, how do you want to be communicated with? how often, not too specific, because we know people don't always, they say what they think, but not what they actually want. So, managing around that, but keeping that's there, as well as if your organization is large enough to do some donor insight panels. So while the surveys are nice, it's really nice to have that one-on-one interaction. And for your mid and major donors who are connected, they're making a commitment, they appreciate having that insight. One of the things that we found is very helpful. So let's say your database isn't perfect, you can't really capture everything back. You can still collect the anonymized data and then give reporting back to your donors. So if they've filled out a survey, you come back to them and say, this is what your community is also thinking. And it's a way to engage, even if maybe your database isn't as sophisticated and you can't capture all of that on there. We like to couple that with some more personalized mailings, email. Well, a lot of our major donors, we still do, the old paper. We like, they have something they can hold on to. And try to make them personalized. So while you might do an impact report for your organization, for a major donor, we will take that and personalize it to exactly what that donor is interested in, whether they've raised their hand through a survey, responded to certain mailings, or actually given in a restricted fund. And you can there's ways to do this that are not super complicated. You have blocks of text that sort of work, and then you put them in and you have your variable text of like how long they've been, their name, and it comes out to be an extremely personalized yearly impact report and can be very, very engaging for this group. On top of that, we also like to recommend people looking at some kind of donor concierge service. So whether you have internal capability to have a lot of gift officers, or if not, there's a lot of places you can outsource this to where you have a donor concierge. They can have a larger group, because it doesn't have to be your $20,000 or $50,000 donors. But these people can they have someone they can reach out to. They can pick up the phone. When they get an email, they see the same person's name on the bottom of every email. When they get a card, it has a handwritten note on it. So that's a great way to start building that relationship. And I did see a question that came up about how to kind of bridge across all the different giving levels. And it is another way to start building some of these bridge programs where you're looking, how do I transition people, but everyone internally can still feel they're getting their credit. But they can see the benefit kind of across the way of how you're moving from a lower dollar donor or a core donor to a major donor, having this kind of bridge mid-level program where you can offer more services, deepen the relationship, and bring more people into that major donor fold.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Barbara. We are racing through our time, so I am actually going to shift over to our audience questions. Panelists, if you had your heart set on any of the kind of pre-prepared questions that you received, please send me a message in the moderator's chat. I'm happy to ask it to you, but I want to make sure we get to our audience questions. Barbara, I'd actually love to start with you for this first one. Do you have any recommended strategies if we're thinking about corporate donors, and is it any different than a kind of individual donor?
I'd have to say that one I am probably not as familiar with. I basically focus more on the individual donor. I will say though that we do have like people consider corporate but are still like single owned business type of corporate donors. And those people you do really want to treat like a individual major donor. You want to recognize where they're giving from, but make sure you're still making that connection. True like foundation giving or corporate giving, I might pass it off to someone else on the panel if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Barbara. Robert, I was wondering if you have anything about corporate donors related to donor walls.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen an uptick in corporate donations on our donor walls recently, and we've had to build some custom features to kind of support that effort. And so one of the things that we do now is we have it's called like an image-based donor list. So you can post logos instead of just, listing in text the company's name. So having that brand recognition out there in a very public space is something that donors, especially corporate sponsors, really appreciate. Similarly, it's good to kind of think in terms of who's actually donating, because at the end of the day, I would probably guess like 60-70%, if not more, of these corporate sponsors, it's really the owner of that company that's giving, and they may want also, recognition at a personal level with their own name in the donor list as well as the logo of their company. And so those are things to consider. It almost becomes a bit of like a media kit, so to speak, for corporate sponsors then.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert. Sarah?
I have a little something.
Okay, Carly and then Sarah.
Go ahead,
Yep.
Sarah. You can go first. Okay. I'll just quickly say that I also think that I know I talk a lot about storytelling, but I think there is a really interesting story about why corporate donations usually come in. And the origin stories of those are really interesting to tell in emails or in newsletters as well, especially since corporate relationships with nonprofits often span multiple development directors, sometimes multiple CEOs or multiple people at the actual organization. So just remembering why this all started is a really fun thing to make known to everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carly. Sarah, over to you. Thoughts on our corporate donors?
Yeah. So the first thing to remember is corporations want visibility, right? So they are in the business of being in business, right? So they want to present themselves as good corporate citizens. They sometimes have volunteer days where their folks will go out and work on site. I have a couple of clients where they have companies locally that come and maybe prep a meal and feed the people in the program, or they gather up Thanksgiving or holiday meal components and deliver those. So the first thing is thinking about how can we make them more visible? So they love group photos, right? They want to see their logo plastered wherever you can get it. So social media, your website, all those places. There are still corporations that do those big fat checks. So they love that if you could do it on site or at their location, depending on what they want. You could do a press release or a press conference, again, providing them with that visibility. So really thinking about how do we help make them more visible? How do we showcase them as a good partner for us? And because that's really what's motivating them to give. I love Carly's suggestion of figuring out what that origin story is, because there's always one. There's always somebody somewhere who motivated that company to give. So I know there's a couple of banks in our area that have a casual Friday. So if you pay, I think it's $5 or something, that you get to wear jeans to work on Friday, and then they take that money and they have a different nonprofit they donate to every single month. So it's just fun. They're focused on fun and visibility. So think about ways that you can engage them. One of my clients just had a crew from a local construction company come in, and they were painting. So it was really fun to just get the pictures of the guys covered in paint and, just the work in progress, doing some videos, asking them how did they feel about contributing to this client in this way. And again, posting that out to social media. So again, that multi-channel visibility approach is really important.
Thank you, Sarah. We did have a question come in that I felt like was a little bit related to one of the topics you brought up earlier, Carly, so I'll have you start us off with it. You had talked about the importance of that first kind of thank you note and the visual of it. And someone asked, is including the tax receipt in that thank you letter kind of diluting the gratitude, is I think the way they worded it.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think I don't want to speak for all donors. So let's first just say, I think just like everything else, maybe surveying your donor base and seeing what they feel when they want that tax letter, for example, might be really important. And I also kind of feel like sometimes just the instant email receipt can really be enough when it comes to those kinds of requirements. I know for me, I'm probably not saving a letter for the next 12 months until I need to go do my taxes. So I'm going to go find that email anyway. But yeah, so I guess I would say that might be something you might have to talk about internally, but my gut feeling would say that something different is best. And I would want maybe my initial, especially if it's a handwritten note, handwritten interaction, or a video interaction, or like somebody suggested, even just an envelope that's blue instead of white. I think I would rather that be separate, in my opinion, but maybe somebody else has a better idea. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Carly. Does anyone else want to jump in on this advice with where that tax receipt goes? Sarah, and then Barbara.
Yeah, when you look at what motivates donors to give, they've done so many surveys, and nowhere in the top 10 is, because I get a tax deduction. Philanthropy is a gift of the heart, right? And so I would echo what Carly is saying in that I think the tax receipt is like, obviously you have to do that, but do it separately and through a different means, because when you include it as part of the thank you, I think we're kind of like missing the point of why they gave. So yeah, I totally agree with what Carly was saying.
Barbara?
Yeah, I would just add that I do think people are looking for it. So I think if you can have something automated, the tax receipt goes out right away. I love when since more and more people are giving online, where you have that checkbox. Do you need this in the mail also? So you know who you need to send it out to. I highly recommend that. And then making sure that's out, because people are looking for that. And if they get a thank you with no official notification, they're going to call you most of the time. So I agree. It's fine to do it separate, but I would make sure that sort of that official, we got your check, here's like the paperwork you need, goes out right away, because that also, to your generational discussion before, a lot of your older boomers and a few of the silent generation that are left, they look for that piece of paper, and that's something they want. I mean, we find for some of our donors, we have a tear off receipt that when they send the gift in, they tear the receipt off so they can keep it in their records, and that does very well. So I would say it's extremely important to send it out, but to Carly and Sarah's point, to have a highly personalized thank you that's handwritten or something, especially for your higher dollar donors, a new sustainer, that goes a long way to building the sort of that longer term relationship while they all still have the paperwork in place. So.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barbara. All right, we are reaching the end of our panel session, and I do have one final question for each of our panelists. But before I ask that, I want to let our audience know that we're about to drop a survey in the chat from the Team NXUnite username. If we did not address your question, if you have a lingering question that's maybe very personal to your organization that you weren't sure this was the right place to bring it up, or we just didn't have time to get to it, we want to make sure we get your question answered. So fill out that survey so we can connect you with the panelist who can answer your question. So fill that out now. And now we'll switch over to our final question. We do only have about 7 minutes left, so it's going to be a little bit of a speed round to get through everyone, but it is an exciting question. And Sarah, I'm going to have you start us off. What do you see as the future of donor recognition, and how can our nonprofits get ahead today?
Let's see. That's an excellent question. I have to think about that for a second. I think first and foremost, so I'm the owner of a 27-year-old, and there's very few times that he's actually using the phone part of his phone. So I think we're really going to have to focus on more digital assets, figuring out. And then the other thing is figuring out how to get onto platforms where younger people are, because we all know the TikTok dances, right? But so I think it's going to be digital. I think we're going to have to figure out how to pick up the pace, because there is this growing expectation of the world moving in a faster way. So I think having those digital assets on hand that we can deliver quickly, even if it's more, not generic, but more kind of broad. But yeah, I think those are going to be the two things that are really going to pick up as boomers move out of the donor space. And more young people move in.
Thank you, Sarah. Robert, I'd love your thoughts on this as well. What do you see as the future of donor recognition, and how can we get ahead?
Yeah, this is an exciting question. I think because right now we're kind of in the middle of a bit of a digital donor wall renaissance, where digital has started to become more widely embraced as the way forward. It comes with a whole slew of innovation happening in both the short and the midterm, which means that I suppose over the long term, the adoption of digital donor walls will become almost exclusive. And with that, with all the other features and capabilities that digital will be able to do, donor expectations are also going to shift. The kind of boring list of names on plaques on the wall just aren't going to cut it anymore. I guess just to get in front of this, I'd suggest that maybe for the next capital campaign that you guys have, instead of having it like a donor wall, traditional donor wall dedicated, maybe using those funds to having something digital that you can then use for cumulative giving or annual giving, something that you can keep using. It's not just a snapshot in the past.
Thank you, Robert. All right, Carly, over to you. Thoughts on the future of donor recognition and how we can get ahead?
Sure. So I would just like to reiterate probably two of the points that I chatted about today. And the first is, the multimedia outreach, making sure that you're really, I know you guys have all mentioned this earlier too, but just really making sure that you're talking to donors in the way that they want to be spoken to is just so important. Like Sarah just mentioned, like if somebody calls my phone, I'm not picking up. That is my phone, not to make a phone call on. That's for scrolling. So don't call me, but there are plenty of other people who would love a phone call. So sometimes you just have to know maybe the generational gaps or how people are wanting to be spoken with. So just finding different ways to do that. Obviously, I think video is, the number one way that you can connect with people. And I think people should hopefully stop being so afraid to get started trying to use video more often. And then finally, I know I mentioned this a few times, but just making sure that the way you are talking about donor recognition is actually a two-way conversation, giving them a way to speak back to you, and just make sure that they feel like they're really a part of your community.
Thank you, Carly. All right, Barbara, final thoughts on the future and how we can get ahead.
Thank you. I think it's extremely important. We know that donor trust and loyalty has been eroding, so it is about finding that best way to connect with your donors, and it's more important than ever, to Carly's point, to really make sure that your donors feel heard and appreciated and having that two-way interaction. I will put in a little pitch for mail, because while I think with all the advancing technology, it is very important to have this omni-channel. Leave a voicemail for someone because they can just read it on their phone when it's convenient. Maybe send a text with a little, very pertinent information if there's something new going on. But there's something really nice about, getting a Valentine's Day card in the mail and having nothing else as part of it. So I would say I see the future of donor recognition as expanding, but I don't see any channel really going away. And it is about, as everyone said here, developing that two-way communication, but keeping all those channels in mind.
Thank you so much, Barbara. With that, we have reached the end of our panel. I want to give a huge thank you to our panelists. I know if we were in person, there'd be a round of applause. So just know I'm sharing that energy through the screen today and expressing my appreciation that way. I do also want to give a huge thank you to our audience. It was a ton of fun to see all the comments in the chat, looking at the polls. So thank you to those of you who joined live and those of you watching the recording. Really enjoy having you part of the community. I really hope you learned something that you can take with you in support of the amazing work that you're doing. You're doing a fantastic job, and we are rooting for you, and we can't wait to see all that you're going to accomplish in this year and beyond. So appreciate you all. I do want to mention that we have a ton of panels coming up in the winter and the spring, and we're already starting to plan the summer. So keep your eye out on the NXUnite website or the NXUnite LinkedIn to make sure you don't miss anything that might be relevant to you and your team. That is it for me. Again, a huge thank you to our panelists, and I hope you all have a nice rest of your day. Bye, everyone. Thank you.